In this lecture, we're going to start creating objects in 3D Max. So first I'm going to go to Create, Geometry, Standard Primitives, and I'm going to start with a box. I'm going to create the box first from the top view, and then we're going to go through the other views. So click and drag to set the base, and then release the click, and then move your mouse up and down to set the height. When done, just click, and then it's saved. Now I can see this box from the top, you can see it from the front, you can see it from the left, and from the perspective if I want to see it from all the angles. That's great. Now, if I want the box to be set on this zero floor, on the ground, for example, in this case, the zero axis, okay, so I can have the height to go up and down. If I want to draw this box on a different axis, on a different view, so I'm going to create this box on the front view, click and drag. You can see the base is not on the floor, it's going to be on the x-axis. And then the height is going to be on the y-axis. It's okay, we're going to go through the system later on the axis system. And now I'm going to go to the left. You can see if I draw on the left view, you see the base is going to be, I'm checking from the perspective, so the base is going to be on the x-axis, and sorry, on the y-axis, and the base and the height is going to be on the x-axis. Great. Now, if I want to create from the perspective view, I can also create from here. It's going to be similar to the top view, okay? Which is the more convenient way to draw, is basically from the top view, or later on when you start getting familiar with the creation and with 3D Max, you can definitely start creating objects from the perspective view. So now I have created 4 different objects, or 4 different boxes, okay, with different sizes, and I've created different views. And you can check them all in the perspective view. Okay, so that's good. Now, after I have created a box, I can start creating anything. So I'm going to go just to the perspective to make things clear. I'm going to go to select, for example, a cone. A cone, I just have to create the cylinder base, release the click, I move up for the height, and then click again, and then I can go to the coning, out or in. So let's say I want, this is what I want. Click, now it's saved. If I want to create a sphere, click and drag, sphere. So as you can see, some of the objects, I have only one click. I click and drag and done like a sphere. For example, the box needs 2 clicks. Click and drag for the base and then move up and click again for the height. As for the cone, it needs 3 clicks. So click for the base, for the cylinder, for this circle, and then the click again for the height, and then another click, the third click, is basically for the cone. So some of them needs 2 clicks, sometimes some of them needs 3 clicks, and some of them need only 1 click. For example, a plane needs 1 click. Done. Teapot needs 1 click. Done. Geosphere needs 1 click. Done. Some of them needs 2, like cylinder. Cylinder needs 2 clicks. The base, remove the click and then go up and then click again. Done. Pyramid needs 2 click. Click and drag, base, remove, move up, click again, done. For example, some of them need 3 clicks, like the cone. We have also the tube. This is the tube. So click and drag for the outer radius, remove the click, and then move for the thickness of the tube. Click again, second time, and then move up, and click again for the third time, and you get a tube. So as you can see, we can create the objects in all the views we want, from the front, from the top, from the left, and from the perspective. And on the other hand, some of the objects we're creating needs 1 click to create, some of them needs 2 clicks to create, and some of them needs 3 clicks to create. So now I've created mainly most of the objects in here. I still have some of them, let's say torus. Click and drag, outer radius, inner radius, done. Okay, and this is basically it. So I don't have any other objects. So I've created all the kind of objects. Now, after creation, okay, as you can see, I can still have one of those objects selected. So now if I want to select or deselect, I cannot. I'm going to create another object and another object. So if I want to get out of the creation mode, I have several options. Okay, the first option is to right click. If you right click, you can see it's deselected, and now I am in the selection mode, which is great. The second option is I'm gonna be creating an object in here, and when I'm done, instead of right clicking, I can go up to the tools and select this icon, which is select object. So I go to the selection mode. So either right click or selection mode. And this is shortcut for this is letter Q on the keyboard. So you can also use the third option, which I'm creating an object, done, press Q, and I go select this icon. Okay. So now I'm in selection mode. So if you want to select this select object, or you press Q, or when you're in selection, you right click, you deselect you go out of the selection mode, the creation mode, and you go to selection mode. Great. If I want to select object, definitely I can select each object by itself, or I can click and drag to select multiple objects at the same time. Great. If I want to select these four objects, and then I want to select these four objects also, you can see this will gets deselected, and now we get selected these objects. Great. What if I want them both to be selected? I want to add these selection. So if I want to add the selection, all you need to do is press Control while selecting. So if I press Control, you can see there's a plus sign, a small black plus sign on my cursor. So now it means I'm adding to selection. So if I click here, I'm adding to selection. Click here, click here, click here. So these are added to the selection. Or I can Control, click and drag. So I'm going to add these three objects to the selection. So now all these added to selection. If I want to deselect some object by mistake, I selected them. Instead of pressing Control to add, I'm going to press Alt to subtract. So if I press Alt, and you can see on the cursor, there's a small black minus, which means I'm pressing Alt, which means subtracting. So I'm going to subtract this from the selection, or this, or this. Or I can press Alt and click and drag and subtract several or multiple objects. For example, these objects. So I can Control and add multiple objects together, or Alt and subtract multiple objects together. Or I can add one by one, pressing Control and click, or I can subtract one by one by pressing Alt. Oh, great. So now I'm selecting this kind of object, and I want to select or deselect objects. Great. Now, this is all in the select object. Shortcut for this is letter Q. The icon next to it is basically select by name. And it has a shortcut, which is letter H. You can see it in here. Okay, as I said before, whatever icon you want, you just hover over it and it will tell you more details about this icon or this tool. So if I go to select by name, okay, and I'm gonna access the selection from the scene. So I can see everything inside this scene, what are there. For example, I have boxes, I have cone, I have cylinder, I have geospheres, and so on and so forth. So I select whatever I want. For example, I want to select my teapot, maybe this and this. So by pressing Control, definitely I select more than one. So these two, and I press OK, and you can see I got selected for this teapots. Great. So in here, it's a good thing that I can select by name. Or instead of selecting by name, I can select by visual. So whatever I see, I can click and select. Sometimes if I have a lot of things inside of 3D Max, it's better to go select by name, and I select by name whatever I want. So I can choose whatever I want and I select whatever I want from the selection area. So definitely, it's always good to name these objects to have them more clear, but I will go through this later on. Okay, so now I just selected objects, okay, by visual, by using the select object or deselecting them, or I can select objects via the select by name. Great. Now, the third icon is basically the rectangular marquee selection. By default, if you click and drag, you have a marquee selection and you can select a marquee. Okay, this is a marquee selection, a rectangular marquee selection, which we're going to be using most of the time. But for any reason, you need to change this marquee selection. You can go here. So if you see this small arrow on the icon or any icon, that means there is sub-elements of it. So there's more options. So click and keep pressing for 1 second and you'll come up with more options. So I can select the rectangular marquee, which is by default. I can select the circular marquee selection, which is circular. I can select the polygonal marquee, which is basically polygonal lines, so it's straight lines, for example, like this. I can have a lasso, which is a free-form pan. For example, I want to select only these objects, for example. I can select them. And the last one is paint. It's just like a spray. So I click and drag, and I can spray selection whatever I want. So this is applicable for all the selection. For example, marquee or rectangular or rectangular or circular or whatever. So I can add, subtract, and create selections. Now the fourth icon is basically this. Okay, it says window crossing. What does it mean? By default, if I click and drag and just touch any object, it will get selected. This is called crossing. So it just cross this object and it will get it selected. So if I do like this, everything that's crossing this selection, it will get selected. If I press on this icon and I go from crossing to window, you can see this icon is a bit changed. So now if I click and drag like this, it won't get selected. It has to be all inside this selection to be selected. So if I want to be more accurate with my selection, so if I do like this, it won't select the 4 objects, it will select just this box. So if I release, you can see this is because this box was only inside this selection. So sometimes it's useful to move from crossing to window to have more specific selection if needed. So by default, I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to go back to the default. Now, I want to go back to this selection by that I've gone through it. So if you press Q to get select object, look in here. If I press Q several times, you can see I can change this as a shortcut. So it will happen by mistake if you're using shortcut keyboard shortcuts. By mistake, I'm selecting or doing whatever I want, and I have the marquee selection, the rectangular, and I press Q by mistake, and then things changed. What happened? So don't worry. By mistake, you press Q again. So you can just go in here and get it back to the marquee selection rectangular, or you can press Q several times, and when you go back to the rectangular, you stop. That's basically the selection part of 3D Max. Now, I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to press Alt and deselect this object, and then I'm going to press Delete on the keyboard to delete everything. Now, I want to go through the transformation tool. So I want to go through Move, Rotate, and Scale. How I can move the object, rotate it, or scale it. I have this object by default, and now I'm going to go access the Move tool. This is the Move tool. You can access the Move tool from here. You can choose the shortcut, which will say, just a second in here, which is W. So you can press W on the keyboard to get the Move tool, or you can right click in here and you can access Move from here. Okay, so select this object, and this is the Move tool selected. Okay, I have the Move tool in here. This is called the Gizmo of the Move tool, which is the icon which will represent the Move tool. So now I know this is Move I have. So now if I want to move the object, I can click and move the object in here. Now, first of all, this is the Gizmo. If I want to minimize or maximize the Gizmo, you can press plus or minus on the keyboard to make it convenient for your view. If it's too big, you want it to get smaller, or if it's too small and you want to get it a bit bigger, all you need to do is press plus or minus on your keyboard. That's first. Second, if you want to move an object, it's always preferably to move an axis, and don't just click in here and move the object on all axes, or you can select the object in here and move. Don't do this. If you want to move, just make sure you select the axis you want to move on. For example, I'm just going to delete this. I'm going to create a new box, which is going to be a bit smaller. Okay, so in here, so I can see the grid with it. So I'm going to go move. If you move the object in freeform mode, okay, you can see now the object is going underneath the floor. Or maybe by mistake you move it here, and you can see it's like maybe sometimes floating. It will be floating over the floor and without noticing that. Okay, so by mistake that would happen. So if I don't want to do that, I need to move on the X. So I can click on the X-axis, click and drag, and now I move on the X-axis. If I want to move it on the Y-axis, I cannot because it's locked on the X. If I press on the Y-axis, it will be locked on the Y, and I cannot move it other than Y. And the same thing goes on Z-axis. Great. Now, if I want to move it on two axes, I can. So I can select the common area between, let's say, X and Y, which is here. So now I can move it on the ground on X and Y. And at the same time, I can select Y and Z, and I can select X and Z. Usually, the most commonly used is basically X and Y, but sometimes definitely we'll use the Y and Z or the X and Z. Or you can always use one axis at a time. For example, I move it on X and then on Y, and I get this kind of movement, except so I don't select both of them. Okay? Great. So this is the move tool. So I can move my object using the axis X, Y, or Z. Great. Now, what if I want to move it more accurately? For example, I want to move this object, let's say, on a measurement, 5 centimeters or 5 inches, or I don't know, whatever you want, maybe 5 units, and you're not working on units, specific unit setup. So I just wanted to move, let's say, 5 units. Great. If I want to do that, all I need to do is basically select the object, go to the move tool, and right click. If you right click on the move tool, you get this option in here, which says move transform, type in. So I'm gonna type in my transformation. I have two options. I have something called the absolute world and something called the offset world. The absolute world is basically this object. Where does it stand? This point in here, which is called the pivot point. We're going to go through it later on. Where does it stand in terms of the 0, 0, 0 coordinates? So on X, on Y, on Z. As I've said, the absolute world is basically this object. How away is this object from the 0, 0, 0 origin? Now, the offset word is basically this point. As for the offset word, it is basically this pivot point in reference to the object. This point in the reference of the object is always on the 0, 0, 0. Always. Wherever I move this object, these values are not moving. As for the other values, you can see they are moving because they are moving away from this point, which is the origin. Okay, so usually if I want to move, okay, and want to type in, and I have a specific measurement or unit, I want to move it. So I would go to the offset word. For example, I have here for example, let's make them a bit simple. I have 40 minus 40, which will say on the x-axis, I have 40 units, okay? 40 units plus 40, which means towards the arrow, okay? And y is minus 40, which is against the arrow, which is going the opposite way. So minus 40 on y and plus 40 on x, and I get this point. Great. And 0 on the z, which is not going up and down. If I move it up or down, it goes plus or minus. Great. Now, if I want to move this object backward on this axis, on the x-axis going backward, so I have to add the value in here. So I'm going to make it move minus, let's say, 10 units. Okay? So if I press enter, it will move 10 units, and then it will do the math for me. So 10 minus 40, 40 minus 10 means, so 30. If I want to move it on y-axis forward, so positive y, so I want to move it also plus 10, and then they'll do the math for me. Minus 40 plus 10, it's going to be minus 30. So that's great. So I don't have to worry about the absolute word, unless if I need to worry about it. If not, most of the time I have to worry about the offset word. If I want to move it in space, in reference to itself, I wanted to move 20 units or 10 units or 5 units or whatever. In my case, I have centimeters. Maybe in your case, you might have different, not metric unit even. Maybe you have inches or whatever. So I will go through this later on to set our unit setup. But until then, we're going to just go with the numbers. Doesn't matter the units. So that's it. So if I want to go more accurate, so I just have to type in. So I wanted to go downward. For example, on the z-axis, minus 20. That's why I'm going downward. So opposite of the arrow, so minus 20. And then you can see I went down. Okay, great. So now if I want to go back, maybe up, so I can go plus 20. And then it will be 0 here. Or I can zero this out you can see I'm zeroing it out on X, Y, Z, and now you can see this point is basically just over the center of origin, which is the 0, 0, 0. Great. So that's basically the different options to do move to, work with the move to. Now, I'm going to go to the rotate, which is going to be the similar. So I'm just going to go a bit faster because it's going to be a redundant work. So I'm going to go to rotation. So I can go axis rotation here, or I can press the shortcut, which is E, letter E, or right click, rotate. Now, this is the gizmo for rotate. If I want to make it larger, plus, minus to make it smaller, this is I'm making the gizmo to be bigger or smaller, up to your convenience. And then, if I want to rotate, it's always preferred not to click in the middle and rotate on all axes unless you need to. So it's always preferred to rotate on X, or Y, or Z. So as you can see, the axes are always the same color. Always X is red, Y is blue, and Y is green, and Z is blue. Okay? It's usually X, Y, Z referred to RGB, red, green, blue, which are the colors that are used on the screen. So always the red is X, the Y is green, and the Z is blue. If I go to the rotate, the same thing. So I can rotate on Y, I can rotate on X, or I can rotate on Z. So if I want to rotate on all axes, I just press in the middle and I will rotate randomly to all the axes. Now, if you want to have more accurate rotation, you can right click on the rotation and you can have the type in. If I want to rotate, for example, 15.5 degrees, and this is what I get on X, or on Y, or on Z. Okay, so that's great. Now I'm going back to normal. I'm just going to access the third tool, which is going to be the scale. So I'm going to select uniform scale. Okay, this is the uniform scale, or I can right click, go to scale, or I can use the shortcut, which is letter R. Okay, great. I can scale on Y axis, I can scale on X axis, I can scale on Z axis. I can also scale on both axes, X and Y, Y and Z, X and Z. Okay, great. Now, in the scale, I can access the middle point. This would make something called a uniform scale. So I can scale all the object uniformly, scale it down, or scale it up. So for example, if I have any object, let's say a teapot, and I want to scale proportionally down or up, so I don't have to squash it on X-axis or Y-axis or Z-axis or whatever. So I scale it down proportionally down or proportionally up. This would happen later on if I'm importing some kind of models for my project. For example, I'm importing a car or maybe a tree or whatever. So I want to scale it down or scale it up, and I need the scale to be proportional. I don't want it to get squashed or stretched. So I have to use a uniform scale. Now, in the scale tool, also we can also right click in here and we can access the transform tool. But in scale, there's one more option other than the move or the rotate. We have more option. That's why you can see there's an arrow here. If I click and keep pressing, I have 3 different types of scale. The first 2 types of scale, they are mainly similar, okay, at least for now. So you can select this scale or the other one. They're mostly going to be similar. There's a slight difference between them. I'm not going to go through it for this course, but I want to make sure you don't by mistake select this one. Okay, it's not by mistake, maybe you need it, but if you press letter R, which is going to be the select for the shortcut for scale, you can shift between these objects, and that's what's going to happen by mistake. You select this one. This one is called squash and stretch. What does it mean? For example, if I'm going through the regular scale, if I want to scale on D, it will move it, scale it up and down as I'm supposed to see it, like this, Y or X. Now, if I go squash and stretch on Y, X, you will see things are different. It's more dynamic, and it's like getting squashed and stretched, which is okay. That would be something great if I need to make it to be squashed and stretched. If I'm doing some kind of animation and I want the thing to be more organic and fluid, I can make it squash and stretch. So make it more wobbly and stretchy. Great. So what's stretching? Is basically I'm preserving the volume of the object. Okay. So if I squash it on Z, it has to go bigger on X and Y. As if you have a balloon filled with air and then you squash it from the middle. What will happen to it? It will go taller. So that's the same thing. So we're going to be squashing it. So if I don't need the squash tool or the scale, so just make sure you select the first one. By mistake, if you have chosen this squash and you don't want it, just make sure you press R again, or you just click and keep pressing for 1 second and you go through the scale, the one that you need. Now, after I've gone through the scale tool, I just went through all the transformation. So create, select, so I can select objects. I can move. Technically, it's called select and move, so I can select and then move. And I went through Gizmo size. I can move visually or right-click. I can type my transformation. Same thing goes for the rotation tool, for the scale tool. The shortcuts for those, as I've said, Q is to select, W to move, E to rotate, and R to scale. So I can select them from here. I can use keyboard shortcuts or right-click, move, rotate, scale, and select. If you see on the keyboard, they just placed by order. So Q, W, E, and R. As you can see, that's why most of people that are working with 3D Max, they have the keyboard on the top left of the keyboard. So because these are the mostly commonly used shortcuts. So Q for select, W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale. Great. Now, I'm going to select this teapot. I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to go through this object and move it up to the corner. And now I'm going to go through the cloning tools. Great. Now if I have this box and I want to clone it or copy it, in 3D Max we say clone because we have more than copy. So if I select this object, the first option to copy or to clone this box is using the edit tool, and then you can go in here and you can press clone. Shortcut for clone is Ctrl V. Usually we copy Ctrl C and then we paste Ctrl V. In 3D Max, if you press Ctrl C, you will create a camera. So don't press Ctrl C by mistake. So Ctrl V. When you press Ctrl V or you go to edit clone, this window will appear, which is the cloning option. It will ask us, do you want this object to be a copy or an instance or a reference? Okay, I'm not going to go through a reference for now. I'm just going to go through copy or instance. What's the difference? Copy is just a copy, which have the same size, the same type of object, and so on. The same characteristics. While instance is a bit more than that. They are the same object. It's a copy of this object, but they share the same parameter. Okay, and we're going to go through parameters later on. For example, if I have this object, this box, and I clone it as instance, and then I decided to make this object a bit taller or maybe narrower or maybe have it rounded in a different way, the other object which are instance to it will have the same characteristic. They will change the option or the shape or the size or the look of it. Great. So in my case, I'm going to go copy for now. So I say copy and I did a clone. Nothing happened. What actually happened, it did a clone of this object exactly on the same location. So now if I move this object, you can see there's another object. So Ctrl V, copy again, move. Ctrl V, copy again, then move. Ctrl V, copy again, and then move. Great. Now, I'm going to copy this. Now I'm going to copy on X. I have another. There's another type of cloning. Okay. Select the object. And now, instead of doing copy and copy and copy several times, if I have to copy this object maybe 100 times, that's going to be a bit a waste of time. So select this object, press Shift, and then go on the Y-axis in my case, click on Y, and drag, and you can see that I have already a clone of this object. So I set my distance, let's say this is my distance, release my click, and then I get the options. So it's going to be a copy or an instance. So let's say, for example, a copy. And now I have this option, which is new. number of copies. So if I said, for example, I want 100, then okay, and then I have a set of 100 box, okay, copy. So definitely this is going to be an easy way to have a copy more objects. Let's say if I have more than 5, 6 objects or 10 objects, so definitely this is an easier way. The third option is basically have a clone. So I'm gonna go here, tools, array. Okay, so I'm gonna do an array instead of copying one by one or copy several ones. I want to copy several ones, maybe move, maybe rotate, maybe scale, maybe different option combined together. So as you can see, array, the window of array is a bit complicated. It looks complicated, so I'm gonna go through it and make it simple. First of all, press the preview button, so everything I change in here, I can see the effect on the viewport. Great. Second option, I'm going to be working through the 1D, and this is my count. How many copies I want? So let's say I want 10. Great. You want them to be a copy or an instance? You will say. So I'm moving from right to left. So I set all these numbers. Great. So maybe I don't want 10, I want 5, for example, or 4, or whatever. Copy. Great. Now I'm going to go move up. I want to move, or I want to rotate, or I want to scale. So in my case, if I want to do the similar objects, similar stuff, I want to move. So okay, I'm gonna move. Do you want to move on X or Y or Z? I look at the X, I want to move on Y. So on this parameter. Great. Do you want to move on plus Y or minus Y? In my case, it's plus Y. So what is this distance you want? So I can be more accurate. So I want, let's say, 40 units. And that's it. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Difference between one point and another is basically one object and another is 40 units. In my case, centimeter, but it doesn't matter. We can change that. So 40 units from here to here, definitely 40 units from here to here, and 40 from here to here, and then 40 from here to here. If I add more count, everything is live. So I can add, I can subtract, I can do whatever I want. I can change my movement value. I can move from on X, on Y, and on Z at the same time. And I can also rotate on X, on Y, on Z. Same time. I can do also scale. So this is the difference between a clone, regular clone, and an array. So I have more flexibility to it. I can do something more advanced with that. But at the same time, it's a bit more complicated. So I'm just going to go to the basics that I've started with. So if I want to do, let's say, an accurate measurement, for example, of 40 units, on the y-axis, and I need, let's say, 10 boxes. So this is 100% accurate. When I'm done, I press OK, and it's saved, and everything is perfect.